Hello from my side. I would say it's lovely to see you, but unfortunately I cannot. Thank you very much for accommodating me despite being online. Okay, without further ado, to present myself and the topic of discussion. So I am Olga Hatzifoti. I am a PhD student under the supervision of Dr. Maria Rusu at the Department of Informatics and Telecommunications in the University of Athens. And I study voice-based interactions in immersive interactive digital narratives with a focus on cognitive and affective dimensions of the user experience. So let me double check that this is going to work. Great. So a bit of definitions, since the domain isn't very well known. So first of all, I use the term voice-based interactions instead of the more popular voice user interfaces to highlight that I study the process of producing voice, as opposed to, for example, listening to voice, be it human or synthetic, which is already a popular area of study. And in addition, I use the term immersive in the literal sense that it's an objective quality of the technology used. And specifically within that, I focus on the use of virtual reality head-mounted displays. The reason for this is that there is limited but interesting research that suggests that voice input is especially suited to this environment. Furthermore, I mentioned that I focus on interactive digital narratives as the exemplar application domain, which represents the type of interaction scenarios that I focus on. This is storytelling and dialogue. Having said that, any application from domains such as art, culture, education, and healthcare that integrates narrative scenarios with these mechanics is within scope of this research. So I have here a thought experiment so that we can still, voice interactions are not very common in immersive applications, much less narratives. So I used real work as an example for the thought experiment. The work is not on blindness. It's a short VR documentary where we have abstract visualizations and they unfold in sync with the voice recordings of the writer, John Hull, who progressively lost his vision, hence the voice recording. So this is a very powerful story. It's told in first person and it has a very core function for voice. So the thought experiment is as follows. How would you think the user experience would change if instead of passive listening, the user would actively use their own voice to unfold this narrative? So would you expect that changing the input modality and the interaction design from something silent to something vocal would affect your relationship with the text in any meaningful way? And how? So in order to investigate this question, I have formulated into 3 research questions that are a bit more structured. They relate to user experience dimensions. They arise from previous work and multidisciplinary findings from psychology and human-computer interaction. And the first question relates to key immersive constructs such as presence, co-presence, and embodiment. While the next 2 questions, they focus on outcome dimensions that generally critical works aim at. So the user's emotional and cognitive engagement with the content. To investigate the research questions, the first proposed step is a comparative user study. It's between silent and vocal interactions. I use a storytelling mechanic in a simple linear narrative with the additional support of role-playing in order to make it the simplest implementation of the design materials I have. Furthermore, I have 3 conditions. One is the baseline condition, which is silent. It's reading the text silently inside. And the second one is reading the text out loud with no voice technology, while the third one is reading the text out loud with visual feedback of a real-time transcription. So this is, this is a within subjects design. It's adopting condition randomization against sequence bias and content randomization for content familiarity. And specifically, I use some excerpts from a short public domain story, which is written indeed in first person, and the user is role-playing that they are the writer of the diary. A few more details in order to see how the investigation is going to proceed. So aligned with practices for UX and VR, I use a mixed method approach with subjective and objective data. So the subjective data has some open-ended questions on emotion cognition, alongside some interview questions to highlight positive and negative patterns across conditions, and they are going to be analyzed with a thematic analysis approach. Whereas I also use some scale questionnaires after each experience to target the 3 research questions in a more structured way. In addition, I have some physiological and behavioral data, which is directed by the design of this, the choice of this was directed by the suitability, access to sensor equipment, and my own limited expertise in the domain. So I am pairing eye data with heart rate in order to gather insights into the user's emotional and cognitive state. And then we can also draw some emotion state data from voice recordings, which for this experiment are very readily available. Furthermore, to discuss a little bit about the technology behind this, this experiment is going to use voice streaming with real-time transcription and a matching step of the raw transcription to a reference text. And we're doing this in order to optimize both the length segments for minimum latency and to improve accuracy of the results. Furthermore, one tiny detail is that in the experiment, the participant is in an isolated space because it has been observed from previous research that participants may feel unwilling to speak out loud to the VR experience while someone else is watching, while they have human social context. Finally, a screenshot of the current implementation. In order to isolate confounding factors, I went for a minimal design of the immersive environment with kind of abstract visualizations and no other design elements apart from the text. And for the text itself, I followed standard web accessibility guidelines in lack of guidelines for text specifically in immersion. So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your time already. I hope I remained within the time frame. Actually, I have some more seconds. And I would enjoy discussing on the design decisions of this research before the first experiment takes place, alongside any other recommendations on data gathering or data analysis, and any other comments you may have. So thank you very much again for your time and for having me online. And I pass the floor back to the chairs.